This is Danny from PhilTalk destroying a dishonest Christian. I want to just comment on some of it for fun.
Game over. Lights out.
God and man, and Jesus. And
He's
Jesus
like
is
a
God.
werewolf.
But God
And
is not a
Jesus
man.
is the
But
Father.
Jesus is a man, but there's not.
Is he 100% God?
Yeah, just like light is 100%.
Okay, is he 100% man?
Just like light, God is light is 100% wave. In the same way,
no.
light is both a particle and a wave.
I don't even know. Like, I'm not a physicist, dude. But
Do you think we have a human nature like the same way that Jesus did?
Well, Jesus had a human nature. Yeah.
Is that what makes him 100% man?
Yeah, he was born like we are.
All right.
Yeah, he sets him up.
Do you think that humans having a human nature implies having a body?
Yeah, we have a body.
Okay. Do you think that bodies constrain the way that we perceive the world?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So do you think then Jesus was constrained in the same way?
Yeah, you sweat.
Okay.
You sweat.
When someone's constrained in their perception, that means that they're unable to perceive other things at the same time.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a limitation. Do you think the divine nature is limited in power or unlimited in power?
Yeah, you guys asked me this one, and I don't have a problem that Jesus is limited.
I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about the divine nature.
Yeah, it could be limited. That's fine with me if it is or not.
Do you think God is omnipotent?
it's whatever, man. Like,
I don't know if he is or not. So it's not a big
Do you think
deal.
God
If he's
is
not.
omnipotent?
I don't know if he is. He might not be.
What is it?
Well, he's already said that Jesus is divine, and by that he means he's already...
What I mean by Jesus is divine is that he's the creator of the universe.
Okay, so
But
under
Christianity, the teaching wouldn't be that human nature in and of itself is as limited as you're saying. It became limited, right, because of the fall. So
you think Adam and Eve could see behind their heads?
What's going on here? I wonder. I wonder what this guy's trying to do. Is he just gung ho with wanting to say that? I don't think he realizes where Danny's going with it, because the problem is obviously how Jesus has the divine nature while being a human at the same time, because they're mutually exclusive regarding their attributes. Like, humans aren't omniscient. God is omniscient. God is all-knowing. Humans are not all-knowing. How can he be both at the same time if you define God by omniproperties?
I've never thought about it. I don't know. Would that be required?
Wait, well, yeah, because that's a limitation, and you're positing that Adam and Eve weren't limited.
Okay. Well, I would say, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. So I would say they were limited in that way. Probably they could not, but I am not saying.
Okay, so that's all we need. That's all we need.
Adam and Eve is necessarily the end point.
It doesn't matter if Adam and Eve. It doesn't even matter. We can even grant for the sake of argument that
they could have been gods before they fell. The point is, he took on the likeness of fallen flesh to redeem it. So none of that matters.
Adam and Eve were less limited than the current fallen version of humans. It doesn't matter, because any limitation at all satisfies the fact that they're limited, and the divine is not limited. So everything you just said is changes nothing. Nothing.
Right. So, but under Christianity, right, at some point, the ideal is, right, well, the individual will be in heaven. So, and again, under Christianity itself, says we don't know what we'll be, right, at that time.
That wouldn't be a human nature.
I don't know if we'll be less limited or as unlimited as God. I don't know. And it's
not going to be human nature. In fact, the Christian view is that our natures are going to be changed, right?
Yeah, they'll be
if our human nature is changed to something, that's going to be changed to something different, right? You can't change something into the same thing. Yeah, it doesn't matter. None of this matters.
Danny, I guess where it goes is I don't know what Aaron means. I don't know what the divine attributes are, or what are the properties needed to be divine. It seems like
to be the Most High God, it means that he's the creator. He created the universe.
Do you think God had to create?
No, he is the
Okay,
creator.
so
He's the original.
in a world where God did not create, he's not the creator.
Okay, but he did create.
No, you see, sir, what I'm trying to say is that there's another possible world, as you're saying, where God is not the creator, but he's still God. So that means that your concept of God does not imply creator.
Which world is this? This one that exists in your
the
head?
logically possible world in which he decided not to create.
I don't know. What can you identify that world? I've never heard of it.
You just said it was logically possible. You said he wasn't necessary for him to create.
Well, he did create, so obviously he was necessary. Obviously he did it.
What the fuck?
Okay, look, if I said that, do you think, I don't know, do you have kids?
Nope.
Okay, so if you had kids, it would be true that you had sexual intercourse or something like that, right? Let's say you didn't adopt them.
I've done that.
Does that make sense to you?
Have I had sex before? Yeah.
No. If you had kids, you probably had sexual intercourse, bracketing adoption.
I could have been a sperm donation.
Okay,
Oh
fine.
my God.
Yeah, that's fine. The point is that that's a logically possible world, a world in which you had kids, you had to take steps in getting them, right? Whether it be adopting or sex or sperm donor or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So we can talk about that hypothetical coherently. It'd be very strange to define you as necessarily not being able to have kids because there's a possibility where you do. In the same way that it doesn't make sense to understand God necessarily in terms of being creator, because they're hypotheticals or possible worlds where he chooses not to create, and so in that world, he's still God. Nonetheless, he's not, despite him not creating.
Yeah, he was God before the creation.
Okay, well that's even that I should have just jumped to that. The point is that he's God before creation, which implies that he's not a creator at the moment prior to his decision to create.
Like, I guess you say 14 billion years ago, before the Big Bang, he was still the creator. I mean, he was still God.
Right. Okay. So that just serves my point that your concept of God doesn't necessarily imply creator. So what do you mean by God when you're thinking about him? We're talking about.
He was the one who started the Big Bang. That's God.
Right, but that can't be your definition because he was God prior to starting the Big Bang.
Well, now that we've gone through the Big Bang and creation, he's the one who did it.
Maybe phrase it this way: before creation, how is he God?
Like, okay, Leonardo da Vinci is the one who created the Mona Lisa. Before he painted the Mona Lisa, he was still Leonardo da Vinci.
Right, which means that you cannot define Leonardo da Vinci in terms of creating the Mona Lisa because there was a Leonardo da Vinci before the Mona Lisa. So I'm just posing the same logic.
Yeah, God is the one who created the universe.
Right, but prior to creating the universe, he was still God, and I'm asking what that sense of God means.
He was the same. He was the same being.
Look, prior to the creation, right? There was nothing that he created, no design, just him, right? Okay. Now, in that hypothetical, in that past event, how is it that he is still God?
He just said it. It was just him. It was the same God this whole time.
Yeah. So that sense of God, what does it mean? It can't mean creator because he has not created.
He had the potential to create, the ability to.
Okay. He had the ability to create. Is his abilities at all limited?
I don't know.
Okay, so so you're defining God as whatever has the ability to
create the
universe?
Yeah, that's God.
Okay, so that implies that you could have non-personal causes of the universe.
Yeah, it could,
right?
sure. I mean, you could theoretically have this, like, I don't know, some kind of divine energy. A lot of people conceptualize God like that. But what actually happened is God revealed himself to people, and then he did that in the form of Jesus Christ. So Jesus is God. Jesus was still the son. I mean, he was still a son of God before Jesus was born from Mary. He was still the son of God. That's how he revealed himself. But I mean, you're right to say that there's other ways you could conceptualize the creative force of the universe. and it's not necessary to conceptualize it as the God of, the God of the Bible. That's why Muslims have a different conception. They still understand. They believe Allah created the universe. There's lots of ways to explain the creation. I'm just saying that is the definition of God. God is the creator. The one who
No,
actually
it's not but we already went over this. It can't be the definition of God because
that's a definition. It's not the.
I want the definition. What are the
God
necessary and sufficient conditions for being God? In other words,
to be Jesus.
To be Jesus?
Yeah, that's necessary and sufficient. If you're not Jesus, then you're not God.
Okay, but there are so there are a lot of atheists that believe that Jesus was an historical figure. So do they believe in God?
No. Well, they don't believe. No, they do believe he's a historical figure, but they don't. Yeah, they do, but they don't. They don't believe he's God. So they believe Jesus existed, but they don't believe Jesus is the Son of God.
Yeah, the point is that just believing in a person named Jesus that walked around 2,000 years ago doesn't seem like the necessary and sufficient conditions for believing in God.
That's correct.
Okay, so then what is?
To believe that Jesus is the Son of
God. Okay, so what makes God? Wait, so I'm asking what makes for a God, and you're saying believing that. I'm not. It's not about belief. I'm just want to know the conditions such that we know.
The conditions to be. I mean, now we know. Now that God has revealed Himself in the person of Jesus, we can say Jesus is God. Before that, it was not known, but He was still a creator before He came as Jesus Christ.
Okay, so what does it mean to say Jesus is God again?
He is God. What do you mean? What does it mean?
What does that mean?
It means that Jesus was the one who created the universe.
But we understand that's not the definition of God. I'm asking for.
No, it's just a definition.
No, I want the definition, the necessary and sufficient conditions. Because being a creator is not necessary and sufficient.
Okay. Jesus is to be Jesus is to be God. Jesus is God.
Yeah, but I'm asking what that sense of God means.
He was there. He is God. He was there. Creation. He created everything. Everything was created through
Look,
him.
we already went over this. We know that's not the definition.
How is this? Okay, then I don't know what you're asking.
I'm asking what you mean by saying Jesus is God, and you're repeating yourself saying creator, creator, creator when we already went over that. That
Jesus is Yahweh. He came. He called himself Yahweh in the Old Testament.
Yeah, what does that mean?
That's how it's the name he gave himself. He says,
look, maybe this might help. Most Christian thinkers or apologists will say what it means to say Jesus is God is that he has the divine properties that make him God, which are being omniscient, infallible, say, omnipotent, all of those. Do you appeal to any of those as divine properties? Do you understand any? Okay, so then I don't know what you're talking about when you're saying Jesus is God.
He was the creator.
Yeah, but we already went over that, why that doesn't work.
It doesn't work for you. It works for me.
Well, do you think that's the definition?
Yeah, God is the creator of the universe. That's God.
Okay, so do you think, so then he wasn't God prior to the universe or prior to the cosmos?
No, he just hadn't created yet.
Okay, which means that he's not creator. If he has not created yet, he's not creator, correct? Which means he's not God under your definition.
No, I just say he hadn't created yet. Like this is pre-creation.
Right. Look, if he had not created yet, does that mean that he's not? Does that mean that he's creator?
He's getting ready to create.
Sorry, what?
It was pre-creation. I mean, you're talking about what happened before the Big Bang.
Exactly.
You would never ask a cosmologist these questions.
I'm asking you those questions. You're right. I don't talk to cosmologists. So go ahead and answer the question. Is he creator prior to creation?
He was he was pre-creation. So yeah, I mean, he hadn't created anything. He hadn't created the universe yet, but he was going.
So he's not the creator at the moment prior to the creation.
Okay, 14 billion, whatever, 17 billion or however many billion years ago, he had not created the universe at that point. So,
right. So, but yet he was still God.
That.
Yeah. Yes. So yet he was still God, which means that is not the definition of God or the sense of God you're using.
I just feel like you're like this being so semantic on like this.
All right,
Well,
all right.
you're
on this,
you're
like,
tripping over
recreation.
yourself though.
Aaron?
You agree with me that it doesn't make no one defines.
I can't. No, I cannot explain pre.
I'm not sure how to answer this other than I don't like the idea of the Jesus divine properties being present in his human form because it makes him so it seems to my mind makes him less it makes the problem for his seems to be his dependence on the Father in towards the end of his life, and so into the crucifixion. It seems like, and out throughout the New Testament, it just seems like, or the Gospels, it seems like part of the work of that verse that says he like gave up the properties of godhood in some sense, but like, so I tend to want to say something like I don't really know how to answer it other than like his personhood is like in the lineage of, but I don't even know what that is. I guess it's hard to even describe, but that's kind of how that's just my honest thought on it, but I don't have a good answer for sure.
Creation sensically to you. I think it's.
I'm not asking for that. Look, I'm not asking for that. Look, what you're talking about is some kind of what we call definite description. So like the person that I'm talking to right now is the person that is refusing to acknowledge that God is
like if he somehow veils his divine nature or leaves it behind, however you would want to say it, does it make sense to call him God? Well, yeah, it seems to me it would, because it's still the same person without the abilities. Is God not a person in heaven? Like I don't know, like is God a person? Does God have no personality before he's incarnated? I don't think that would make a lot of sense. I don't know if that even matters. Maybe I'm missing something here, but like the person was born into a body, I would just say something like that. I don't know that dualism really helps here at all either. It seems like if I had superpowers and I always had superpowers, um, and then you could take something about who I am, let's say, like my DNA and some certain memory and my memories or something, and then you could put it into a computer or something where I lose my physical abilities or however you want to look at that. You can make an analogy there with the divine nature somehow. Seems like if you could like logically possible, if it's logically possible to conceive of me being like uploaded into a computer in some sense, and then if that's possible, then it seems like you could take that, some sort of essence of that, and put it into a woman and make it like be born and then develop, and there could be something about who it is that is me put there, especially when you consider how that might work from God being the creator and planning it ahead of time, or just woven into the DNA or whatever. I don't know how you'd say that, but a lot of people probably want to say you need like this spiritual aspect, the spirit or whatever, but I don't really know what that would make you any more you than, unless God's, I don't imagine God spirit in the fetus or the first splitting cell of the person Jesus in Mary's womb, like looking at his hypothetical watch, tapping his foot, saying, "When do I get out of here? This is boring."
is not the creator.
In other words, I think Jesus, when he was developing in the womb, wasn't thinking with the mind of God, but it was still the person. Maybe that's bad, but like you could ask that question. I've been thinking about that for a long time. It's like, does that make him not God anymore if like God became a person and he was two cells in Mary's womb at one point, at conception? Like, did like a magic sperm appear in Mary's egg that was God's sperm? They didn't have sex with her, but I mean, it's like how technical do you want to get with it, right?
Prior to creation, that person is you, but that's not like the definition of Aaron or anything like that. That may not have anything to do with your identity, but it does point to you. Okay, what I'm asking for is a definition of God, right?
Like,
did Jesus have a Y chromosome, and where did it come from? Did God put it in the DNA? Was he So when the first cell split, and the egg split, when it was, or was it just in Mary and then activated? See, we could talk about this in our miracles thing, CJ. The virgin birth, like where do you want to start your sciency-ness with the virgin birth? What's required for it to be Jesus, and what potentially doesn't it require to be the same person that is the angel of the Lord or whatever, the eternal Son? What are the essential properties in the zygote? Like, does he have to have the mind of God as the Y chromosome magically implanted? I don't know. See, they call it, he's the seed of the woman. What does that mean? What could that imply? That's an interesting question too. Like, does that imply that like she had a dormant Y chromosome in her? I mean, did Jesus, if you looked at Jesus' chromosomes when he's on Earth, would he have a Y chromosome? I would suspect yes.
Okay, I'll give you an example. Like your mom, before she was birthed you, even before she was pregnant with you, she was still your mom. She existed before you were born. She was the same person.
Yeah, but no one would say,
oh my goodness.
Prior to her having kids, no one would say that Jessica is mom.
Okay, so don't call her mom, but she was still Jessica. So Jessica's been Jessica her whole life.
Yeah.
And she was always going to have you eventually. Looking backward now, we know that, but she just hadn't gotten pregnant yet.
Yeah, that's fine. What I'm trying to say is it's nonsensical to define my mother as mother, right? Because
they're fine. I call her Jessica. That's what I say.
Okay, so then let's talk about Jesus.
Yahweh, okay, Jesus was Yahweh before. Yeah, Jesus is Yahweh.
Okay.
Hey, what's up?
Nothing much.
Have we met before?
I'm going to try to answer your question. Or
oh, hey, okay. Go ahead.
Because the Word became flesh. So this conception was spoken into existence. That's my take on it.
Oh, that's weird. Okay.
What do you mean weird?
No, I just mean I've never thought of that. But I tend to think it's like, are you saying that Jesus didn't exist before this or something? As a person, then, I guess? Or what? How would you answer that idea?
Well, that's the whole Trinity question. The Spirit, yes, the Holy Spirit existed, obviously, but the flesh.
That sounds okay. You know, look, I'm not going to attack you for whatever your belief is. I don't care. I mean, in the sense that I don't care to attack you. That kind of sounds monistic, if you will. Like, whose spirit did he have then? I mean, you're a dualist, right?
Well, I just told you, the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, but the Holy Spirit doesn't come down on him till his baptism. Or what is? How would you explain that?
I don't really have. I don't really have an answer for that, but yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think.
Any other thoughts you want to? Yeah. Any other thoughts before I started again?
No, you watching Danny on PhilTalk? I mean, dude.
Danny's my friend. And I think he's smart. I can learn from him.
All right,
that's all.
That's okay. What they say.
Yeah. I'm curious where it's going to go. I haven't actually listened all the way through, so this is all new to me too.
Okay, so now what does Yahweh mean?
Yahweh is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Okay, what does God mean there in the sense of in that phrase, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?
God was the one who created in the beginning.
No, we already went over that. We can't. That's not the definition of God, right? We already went over this. You might just want to say, "I need to think about it."
I feel like he's teaching a school class or something like that. He's like the professor or somebody.
Well, I think it's clear that the guy doesn't know what
students.
Well, okay, yeah, but I know that I like, for instance, like, I'm not sure I have a good answer for this. I've thought about this sort of thing before, and like, it seemed right away clear to me that Danny knew exactly where he was going with it, what problem it was, which I agree is an issue, and because I've thought about it before, and I'm unsure of my own answer for it. But it was also clear to me. It was also clear very quickly to me in listening to this that the person was not aware of where this was going and the issues that were going to come up, and now he's just kind of throwing stuff out there. And so at some point, Danny's just got to like, he's trying to help him, I think, and I think he should. I mean, I don't think he's just posturing. In other words, like it's appropriate for him, in my mind, anyway. Um, to it is true. If the guy doesn't have an answer, don't just throw poop at the wall until something sticks. I mean, you can try, I guess, but at some point, I would want somebody at some point to say to me, "Hey, that doesn't work for
Yeah.
this reason,"
Well,
and
that
like
yeah,
you think about it.
yeah. Because that's what happens when people question you rapid fire. You feel like you have to give an answer or something.
That's true. That's true too. Yeah, you're right. I think sometimes I wish people would be more upfront. Sometimes I don't like it, like in the moment, like someone because I feel like someone's talking down to me. But at the same time, like there are times to be appropriately be talking down to if you're kind about it. That's all. That's all I mean. But I hear what you're saying. I think it is you want to give an answer. That's totally reasonable.
Work within my framework of understanding.
Look, does
I
it
don't
make
care
sense? Does it
about
make sense?
pre-existence. I
Look,
don't
does
ask
it
those
make
kind of
sense?
questions.
Again, look, does it make sense to define you as the person that refuses to acknowledge or refuse to acknowledge that God wasn't creator prior to creation? That makes no sense, and to define
Okay,
you that
God
way.
was not the creator prior to creation.
Right. So, what is the sense? What's the sense of God
God
that
was
you're
the one
using?
who was going to create prior to creation.
Yeah, but then there are logically possible worlds where God chooses not to create since He has free will. In that case, He would still be God.
Which world is this? Where is this
It's
world?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. That's an interesting point. The Y chromosome of David. So I would say this. Well, isn't there a way he connects to David through his mother? Am I wrong about that? I have a vague memory of looking at this a long time ago, dealing with
Well, of
the.
course, it comes from Adam, son of man, son of Adam, through Adam to Heli to Mary.
Yeah, but I mean, if like, where did Jesus' Y chromosome come from? Can you get it from the mother? I don't think you can. That's why man and woman are needed to make kids, right? Or is that wrong? Do women have the ability? I don't even know how to ask the question. It's like, where did God put a Y chromosome in her egg
Sounds
with
like
like
a
a phantom
sounds like a
sperm?
question. Sounds like a question for Danny.
No, I'm responding to the synagogue like regarding this issue here. Jesus, like he needs a Y chromosome from David. Well, what would that mean? Would that mean he has got to get it from? Can you get it through the mother? I don't even know how that works. I guess. Other than that, I know that the man contributes a Y. I would imagine to the whenever a woman has a child that's a boy, like presumably either gets one X and one X from each parent, or an X from the mother and a Y from the father. I would think, but I could be totally wrong about that. But Jesus not having a father, like in the same sense on the earth, I would say. How does he get the Y? The
Well, he's
Y.
the son of God, so I would say God was his father.
Yeah, but his flesh is from the line of David. How necessary is that to be like a literal thing? I don't know. I mean, could God just give him a chromosome that was Y, that was, I mean, related to David? I don't even know what the criteria is. I guess just thinking out loud. Sorry, CJ, you're distracting me. Yeah, right. Exactly. It doesn't matter necessarily to the conversation. I don't know if how he. Let's see. I don't know if the how is relevant. Right. Exactly. To whether or not he'd have it, though. Yeah. True. He could just be what it needs to be. But that's another question. That comes after, like, how did he receive the Y? I guess I need to look into how that works exactly. Like, can I think you have to get it from the father, I would suspect. Right? I mean, I don't, unless there's some other thing I don't know about. Where did God get the Y chromosome? Like, is God's Y chromosome always existing from with him, or is it the same kind as Adam? I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're not really producing another person. This is God in flesh. So it's not
Oh, I
like
disagree. It has to be it has to be fully person, fully
what I'm
human.
saying is it's not like another person. This is
Oh,
God in
oh,
the
oh. I
flesh.
see. Yeah, yeah, right. Okay. Like obviously I'm gonna this whole conversation is stemming around the like assertion that Jesus came in the flesh and he's 100% man in the sense that's necessary for him to be able to call him fully human. But yet that's the whole controversy about how that could even work that's going on in this conversation. Like, how is he all God and all man if God has attributes that are antithetical to man? How can he really be God in what sense? That, at least in my mind, that's what this is.
Well, I mean, it's the difference between spirit and flesh. You asked me if I was dualism. I mean, I think we all have those two things. So there you go.
Well, I think that too, but if he has, like, presumably God was. See, there's issues here with either way. It's like, if yeah, okay, even if I accept dualism, it doesn't even really matter with where I'm going with like this or thinking about on this conversation because if it's the same kind of spirit, only a like godly one that the logos is or something, then that goes into this fleshly body, then that kind of ruins your whole thing at the beginning there that he wasn't really. I mean, it seemed like you wanted to not really affirm the personhood at until Jesus becomes a man, but then the question is it if God was like for no most Christians like logos is a spirit which is fully a person. He's the one of the God, one of the persons of the Godhead. That's he's not missing any attributes of a person. Oh, then you could say, well, the human persons they have what the same thing as a spiritual body plus they get flesh, and so Jesus just so now. But then now you got two people there, or like, um,
Put it this way. One guy explained it to me like this. You go to a funeral and there's a casket and there's somebody laying there. I'll even use the same word. He said Kevin. There's Kevin laying there. And you say, look, there's Kevin. But then you also say, no, wait a minute, Kevin is in the heavenly abode, right? So Kevin is in both places. They're not two different people. It's the same person. One is spirit and one is flesh.
yeah, but were they more of a person before when they had their body together? Like at the end of the day, you're saying the person is not their body.
I
It's
just
like,
said it was. I just said Kevin is laying
yeah,
there.
that's like a contradiction. Oh, you are a body, but then there's your body and you too separately. They're both you. I mean, it seems problematic because now you got two of you.
Well, yeah, it's just, you know,
Maybe that's not a problem. It just seems like a problem to me, I guess. But it seems like if you're going to call the body you, even in the situation where you can be out of your body, how is it still you? It'd be like part of you. And so, like, you would be. I thought that, like, one of the premises of dualism is that you are not your body, in fact. Your body is like an avatar. You are your spirit. I thought that was like, I'm not a body. That's just, I
well, I'm
am.
pretty sure they're both working together while we're here.
Well, sure, but that body isn't you. You could go into some other body and that would be you. Isn't that true? Would you cease to have your same spirit, soul, mind if your spirit left your body and went into some other body or a mechanical body? Like,
Doesn't work.
would that not be
Doesn't
you
work.
anymore? Would it
Doesn't
not be
work like
you?
that. Doesn't work like that.
Why not? Oh, because you only can work in your body, and so in other words, it's not.
Because the flesh is the shadow image. Let us make man in our image. It's the shadow image of the spirit. You can't put your spirit in a. It doesn't work that way. That's why God in the flesh can only be his flesh can only be representing the Holy Spirit. Can only be one person. Same for us.
Does it well? Is God one or two then?
I didn't say it was two.
So is the spirit of God entering in the body to make Jesus? Wouldn't there be a part of God lacking then? If God in heaven lost his spirit and it's in a body of flesh? I don't know. I'm just asking. I'm really just asking. I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
Well, I don't know what you mean. Lost his spirit. I don't know. Follow it.
Well, like if God is one and
But
his
then
spirit
again,
goes into a body, wouldn't God in heaven be lacking?
put it this way. This is the way I have heard it explained. You have a tree, right? And the tree casts a shadow, right? It's the shadow is not another tree. It's just an image of the tree. Okay, so that tree, you could say, is your soul or your spirit or true you, and the shadow image is the flesh. And that shadow image eventually will go away.
Don't you need it? Aren't you getting? Why does we need a new body later then? Or why do we need bodies in the first place? Sounds like a extra weight. Our
That's the
bodies
whole point of
prisons?
living in the flesh.
Are we our bodies prisons for our true spiritual bodies that are set free at death? That sounds really
Yes, yes, they
sounds
are. You're in prison.
really? Are you just giving it to me? What would you do? You feel that way?
Well, if you want to use those words, I'm just saying that's probably I wouldn't disagree with that.
You're not OSAS, are you?
Once saved, well, hey, once I was saved, I was always saved, but I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. Yeah, if you got unsaved, you wouldn't have been saved. But the way you accepted that, and then that sounds really Gnostic.
Well, I don't know what that means, but I know
Oh,
that
okay,
I've
that's
studied
fair.
this and I feel very comfortable with what I think.
Hey CJ, what's up, man? What are your thoughts? What am I missing here, buddy?
Well, I got a couple thoughts. So my first thought would be in regards to what Danny is asking. Man, there's so many different ways to go with that, actually. So the first off, just the straightforward answer, I think, is maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. But what comes to mind to me is God is definitionally the greatest possible being, and the sole source of existence itself. You could even probably call God existence itself. And that I think would be as definitionally sound as you could get. Although I don't think the question necessarily matters in the sense that, like, if I wasn't able to describe to you what the essence of a human being was, which until we discovered things like DNA and stuff like that, I wouldn't be able to. I could still describe by virtue of attributes what a human was, right? So, like, if I didn't know that there was a DNA that made human beings human, I could still describe humans by their attributes. And though it wouldn't be as definitionally sound as what Danny's looking for, it would suffice given no greater information available. You know what I mean? And so that I think is a thing there. The other thing too is when he talks about it was God like a creator before he created. I'm gonna throw you guys for a loop here, but I would argue yes. And I know, like, logically, that doesn't seem to make sense. Like, you're not a mother before you have conceived a child. But I think there's a couple ways in which it actually would make sense if we thought about it a little deeper. The first is that God is an atemporal being. So he exists simultaneously before the creation, during the creation, and after the creation. And secondly, I think that God, when he does a thing like judging, for example, or saving or creating, I almost think it's like him expressing his attributes and actualizing them in reality, not so much that he's gaining those attributes, right? So, like, when I was, or when, let's not use me because I live here in the year 2022, right? But when the first person ever was saved, at that point, God didn't become Savior. Rather, the attribute of Savior was actualized in reality. But he always was Savior, right? And I think it's probably
I get
It's like,
it. It's cool. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
yeah, and I think that in a limited sense, I think that applies to us also. Certainly limited because we're not atemporal beings, meaning we're not eternal, right? But well, at least
Other
we're not.
than in the mind of God, we are in some sense, but we don't exist or are aware of it. But He would
Yeah,
know
well,
us.
and that is actually kind of where I'm going with it, though, in that um, there is a sense in which my mom, before she was ever even conceived, was still my mom, because in the matter of like the essence that is made up Geraldine, that's her name. It's something that God is fully aware of already at the beginning of time, but is actualized slowly through the process of her actually living her life, right? And this is actually something you hear a lot in the Calvinism versus any other sort of ism debate. People will say, like, so are the elect saved before the moment when they became saved? And it's
Yeah,
like, well, yes, and
superlapsarian. Is that superlapsarian too? You don't Calvinists among themselves argue about this?
they do, they do. And I would argue,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, you're fine. I would argue that if you had a hypothetical where a member of the elect was somehow killed off before they became a member of the elect, well, first off, I would argue you kind of have a little bit of a contradiction. It's kind of a square circle situation. But just assuming for the sake of argument that happened, and ignoring that, right? Running with the thought experiment, in other words. I think that by essence, they are a member of the elect. And the event when they were saved is when that is actually actualized, to be redundant, in the real world, similar to how God is always creator by essence, but he becomes creator in a sort of real sense, in a tangible sense, by working through the timeline he's created. And
Well,
I'd be
yeah, because
interested.
that's where let me sum that up, or like ask you a question about that, because like I've brought that up before and been like, well, most Calvinists won't say because they don't want to say they're regenerated before they accept Christ, because that's what regenerates you in time, right? But like by definition, in the Calvinist strain of thought, if you're an elect, it's inevitable that you will be saved. So like to think that you would die before you actualized it, and you're insisting that its actualization is the moment of where it actually gets implemented in the person, that doesn't work, because by definition to being the elect, with that definition of having to be actualized, if you died before it, you wouldn't be elect on those terms. And so that's like, it's kind of like a non sequitur. And I think that's why I've heard like James White say, like, he doesn't like that's one of the problems with, for instance, like, having countercausal free will, because in other words, things are what they are because God determined them to be that way, and there is no other possible world in reality. You know what I mean? It's just what God knows, and that's what is. And I think that's why some Calvinists, at least in my mind, I thought that this is one of the issues that makes a Calvinist not want to have Molinism be the case. Because why would God have these other hypotheticals? No, God knows what will be, and that's all there is.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's actually why I said you kind of have a square circle situation. And to illustrate, let me use a Molinistic kind of example, right? Timeline A is a timeline that God has actualized in which Jamie becomes a Calvinist. And timeline B is a timeline in which Jamie becomes a Seventh-day Adventist, which, to the best of our knowledge, that would be, perhaps there's a timeline C where both of these things happen, which could be our own, who knows? But so far, time B is our own, right? Now, if you lived your entire life without ever becoming a Seventh-day Adventist, because maybe it was cut short before you had ever like actually accepted the doctrines you grew up with or something like that, then it would logically follow that the timeline in which you became a Seventh-day Adventist was not the timeline that God actualized. Well, now, if you take that back to Calvinism, then the timeline in which an elect person died before before the actualization event of their saving, right? That timeline is a timeline in which that person is actually not elect. And so it becomes a little bit of, like I said, a square circle situation. And the reason I use square circle rather than something like non sequitur is because it's not simply that the thing doesn't follow. It's more that the thing is contradictory, right? You can't, in other words, a person who is elect can't live a life where it is never actualized that they are elect. And so
Right.
and so that's why I'd say, like, I could play the thought experiment game for a moment just to suffice the philosopher asking the question. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. And it could even be illuminating to certain elements of your life. But as far as, is this a thing that gives you maybe tangible knowledge about the nature of elect versus non-elect? I don't think it is. It's
Well,
almost,
why do you think Calvinists are often compelled to want to say you're not really elect? You're not. It isn't actualized that you're not the elected until it's actualized. Because you could. There's, to me, it does seem right to say that, in the sense that you're like believing actually is what initializes salvation, because it's supposed to make a change in the person, right?
Mhm. Well, there's a couple things. I think first off is just because Scripture says as much, right? When it talks about, by grace are ye saved through faith. It doesn't say by election are ye saved through faith or something like that, right? The point there just being that while I think elsewhere in the Scripture and other places do say, we are saints by election, there's also like a mechanism the Bible gives for that mechanism being grace through faith, the grace of God, which delivers unto those who are elect faith in him, specifically saving faith, right? But the other thing too, and
maybe elect has a more limited meaning. It just means chosen by God.
well, and I would argue that actually is exactly what it means. And there is also, though, the sense where, I'll be honest, Calvinists are not usually incredibly well versed in philosophy. There's a reason for that. It's because there's an aversion in fact, it's similar to Baptists in that regard, where there's an aversion to philosophy. It's like, that's what the other guys do. That's not what we do. And so as a result, when somebody asks this question, typically, it's like, it kind of catches them off guard, right? It's like, oh, that's a question I've never thought of before.
We just believe the Bible around these parts.
That's actually exactly correct, right? And that's
Yeah,
why I said
same in
it's
my
very
position.
similar.
Same with me.
Right. Really same with all fundamentalist style Christians, right? Baptists, Pentecostals, SDA, Calvinists, right? Those who are fundamentalist Protestant, for the most part, have an aversion to philosophy. Now, the ironic thing about this is all of the original fundamentalists, as well as the original reformers, were very well versed in philosophy. And so it's kind of a,
Hey man, I smell something burning over here. Somebody help.
But you know what I mean? Like Martin Luther and C.S. Lewis and William Jennings Bryan and the Princeton guys, all these guys are very well versed in philosophy, but for some reason it didn't catch with everybody else. But because of that, I think you have an inability amongst a lot of people to actually answer these kinds of questions. It's something that I had to branch out and find myself, right? I mean, in fact,
they use their brain even.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily go that far, only because.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, and it's not necessarily. Here's the thing: philosophy occupies a weird space in the fundamentalist head, right? Where it's like separate from other forms of knowledge. Just to give an example of this, you have plenty of Baptist biologists, right? Or young Earth creationists, paleontologists. In fact, Standing just had a paleoanthropologist on his show today, right? But when it comes to philosophy, it's almost like, no, that's like the other. You know what I mean? It's like that comes from the upside down, to use a Stranger Things reference. You know what I mean? It's like seen as a fundamentally different kind of knowledge that's not very Christian.
You watch that show, you are not saved then.
Well, it's funny though, because I get your joke though, because that's part of the same culture we're talking about, right? Is that whole like, oh, you watch fiction and therefore you must not be a Christian. And granted, Stranger Things is particularly dark fiction. I'll grant that.
I want to
but
watch it. I haven't, but I want to. So
my wife really loves it. I'm actually not a huge fan. I don't mind it. It's not like bad, but it's just not really my cup of tea. It's a little bit too horror themed for me. But the fantastical elements and the sci-fi elements, I think, are super cool. But anyway,
yeah, I saw clips of it or whatever. Yeah, I feel you. But dude, a lot of people that I know, I think I don't even realize it, but people have said that kind of thing to me too. Like that I've met online. I think a lot of people have kind of grown out of it or whatever. But saying like, "Oh, vain philosophy," it's like, dude, that's not exactly right. Okay, like we're all using philosophy. We have to. Blah blah blah.
well, yeah, and on top of that, there's a couple ways to go with it. You can talk about science, so-called. That's in the scriptures. It doesn't mean we're against science. We're against a certain kind of science, right? Science, so-called, and we're against a certain kind of philosophy, namely vain science or vain philosophy, right? But also, I think I like to point out that there's philosophy all throughout the Bible. Some of it's like purely ethical, legal kind of philosophy, like the Torah and the Book of Corinthians. But purely philosophical works do exist in the scripture, specifically what Solomon wrote. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and to a limited extent, Song of Songs, though not quite like the other two. I mean, Ecclesiastes, my personal opinion, Ecclesiastes is the single most important work of Judeo-Christian philosophy ever. C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, William Lane Craig, all those guys can take a backseat. No disrespect to them, right? But
CJ, why didn't God put in more clear philosophy between the free willers and the non-free willers? Couldn't he have done? He could have easily done it.
Well, to be honest, I kind of believe in a way that he did. I think that one of the big problems is, from my view, it appears that the Bible is an inherently compatibilist work. And so everybody has their verses, right? And all their verses are properly interpreted. But the thing is that it's a both and situation. I actually coined a term for precisely this. It's similethia. And it comes from Greek words meaning simultaneous truth. Basically, the idea is when you have two competing positions that are actually both accurate. Kind of similar to a paradox, but they don't necessarily have to be contradictory. On top of that, we use paradox for a completely different purpose these days anyways. Not the point. The point is, so the idea behind a similethia is like, good example. America is the greatest country ever. Also, America has committed some of the worst atrocities in the modern era. Both of those things, in my opinion, are true, and they're equally true. And the other truth doesn't actually take away from the previous, right? It's just as true that you have more opportunity here than anywhere else in time or in place, as it is that we slaughtered 20 million Americans, Native Americans, over the course of 150 years. And if you want to get real big, you could say 200 million, but I think most of those died from disease, and I don't really think it can. I don't know. I think it's dishonest to say that those are the fault of the U.S. government, but I digress.
Sorry, but I would just say America's the best. The poop is fertilizer, and America's the biggest pile of poop.
Well, but you can see there how, like, the concept, right?
Yeah, I know, totally. I see what you're saying. No, absolutely. Yeah, America does evil stuff and also is the best country that's ever been. The most, I would argue.
Yeah, and so what I would say
killed the most people, even maybe.
Yeah, that's probably, in a way, that might be true, and I think it's similar when it comes to the idea of free will and of predestination, right? In my opinion, predestination and free will are both accurate. They're both true. And none of those truths takes away from the other truth, which is the whole point about compatibilism, right? In fact, that's one thing that a lot of people get wrong. They think compatibilism is like half destiny, half free will, or God predestines some things, but he doesn't predestine all things. But that's not actually accurate. That the proper definition of compatibilism is that free will and predestination are perfectly compatible, meaning everything is 100% will and 100% predestination at the same time simultaneously, or at least everything that involves these kinds of choices, right? Obviously, whether or not the tree grows has nothing to do with our free will, but So I think that can throw people for a loop sometimes because they're really not used to dealing with ideas where two supposedly conflicting truths are both considered accurate.
Okay, what's that guy's name who's bald and he's a philosopher and he says he's reformed? He was like
Seitan Bruggencate?
No, he reviewed the White and Craig debate. He's bald and shaved head and he's thin. And he's been on he's a PhD, but he was arguing for Molinism for Calvinists. What's that guy's
Is
name?
that Tim Stratton?
Tim Stratton. Have you
Yeah.
have you heard him argue about this issue with compatibilism or whether or not you can? He makes this argument that compatibilism is like really sketchy in the literature and so that it's really just really confused even in the literature about how maybe it's just theological philosophy, but I can't remember if it's just that though for sure. But he said, and he shows, and I couldn't articulate it to you. I'd have to show it to you. I guess we could look at it really quick and see what you think. But I remember thinking he was making a point, like the reason compatibilism can exist in is a cloudiness of like definitions around like whether or not you can actually have any kind of meaningful free will and determinism true, and he makes some proof about how you can't, basically, or something like that. And he's a Calvinist too, or he's reformed. I think he's a 4-point Calvinist, but like he was making he was advocating for Molinism and Calvinism. But that's kind of an interesting thing. Like it just depends on like what you're thinking about at the time, because like it's in the scripture. And but I've heard James White, like I basically explained what I remember James White saying about why he just thinks it's unnecessary or it's not even really a real thing. It never is a possible world because there's only one possible like line or whatever, right, with God. And like that's an interesting thing to consider though, because like it's clearly suggested in scripture, right? Like unless you want to say God was not telling the truth, like is it why would God suggest that there's like like an if then thing? I mean, I guess I don't know. Then you could ask, well, if then shouldn't exist because God just is deciding everything that happens. Essentially, it seemed like what he was arguing, but then it's like, but God could do something else if he wanted to, and it's like, it's almost like he's half arguing that God doesn't have free will in a sense, but because I mean, but that's the thing with anybody though. Like what you choose is gonna be what you choose, by definition. So it's like, does that mean there's not another possible world? It almost seems like denying possible worlds should even be a conception. Like, does the idea that we can conceive of possible worlds that are logically possible suggest that there are alternative decisions ahead of us? In a way, it kind of seems to be the case. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a couple thoughts, so I won't be able to hit them all. But I think the big thought that I have is, I think the muddiness, it comes from two places. One is the aforementioned lack of properly defining it, which actually doesn't happen in the philosophical literature as much as it happens in the apologetic literature, right? So you'll have apologists who are compatibilists who don't know how to properly define it, but theologians and philosophers who are defining it tend to be much more careful, I think.
Nicholas.
Well, you guys have your back and forth, and I'll let it be. But I do think that, I guess I don't know if I've ever heard him misdefine compatibilism or not. I'd have to think about that. But so that is one portion. And I think another portion, though, is also a confusion on the part of the non-compatibilist as to, certain, like how things could be contradictory. So like, I'll give an example. Leighton Flowers will often say that he believes you don't have any true free will if you are a being created to do what you freely wish to do, but that, whatever it is that you freely wish to do is somehow predetermined. And in my opinion, I think that's a flaw on Leighton's part. I don't see any contradiction. If you
That's compatible. Yeah, you're describing free will and compatibilism, which theologically has usually been the idea that you're free to do what you want, but your will and your nature are gonna make you do what you do, but you're free to do that, but that's determined by God. And so that's what most free will advocates are libertarian. That's why that's the whole reason libertarian exists, as far as I can tell, is to say, no, that's not free will. We want free will that's more than that.
Well, and also I think that you got to think about, like, so, when we think of the concepts of free will, right? You'll have people define it as being able to do something without any outside determination, right? And barring God's own determination, I think that holds true on compatibilism, although it's a dicey subject for sure, because you have things like nature versus nurture. Obviously, I don't have the free will to be an NBA basketball player because I just don't have the genetics, nor do I have the drive.
CJ, you gotta tell yourself what I tell myself, and that is, you just didn't want to feel like practicing enough.
Well,
you could have been better than Jordan. You just didn't want to practice. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. But I think that, so if you had a hypothetical world, we'll do our own thought experiment now, right? You had a hypothetical world where you're a creator, right? And you create a being who, A, has the potential to do otherwise, meaning he is physically, mentally, emotionally capable of doing something else. Let's be specific and say buying a certain cereal. He's physically capable of buying Fruit Loops. He's mentally capable of buying Fruit Loops. He's emotionally capable of buying Fruit Loops, but he doesn't actually buy Fruit Loops. He buys Cocoa Pebbles or something, right? So he has the ability to do otherwise. Then you would ask the question, okay, does he do this outside of any, or sort of, what would be the word here, sans any outside determining factors, assuming God is not a factor here just for a moment, just for the sake of argument, right? And you in the situation, since you made the creature, are taking the place of God, right? But I digress. So is he doing that for any reason not himself? In other words, is he being compelled by culture? Is he being compelled by outside forces, like somebody with a pistol to his head or something like that? Is he being compelled by some like angelic being forcing him to do a certain thing? And the answer to that question, if you have a creature who is created doing the things which they wish to do, is again no. So notice you have two of the qualifications people have for a truly free being. They're able to do otherwise, and they act with no determining factor besides their own wants and needs. And yet determinism in that situation would still hold true. Why? Because again, what's the starting place? God has the ability to create a creature who has a certain set of desires, and so they freely will to do what it is that they actualize.
Yeah, so determinism by fiat, or determinism by necessity or something. That's what that looks like to me, but I get the rub of it. It seems like, how else could you think of it? Like, otherwise it's open or indeterminate, which just means like no reason at all, in fact. Like, why does a man choose one thing over another other than his desires and his makeup that give it to him by his creator, right? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is why, to me, Molinism has always fallen apart so quickly, is because Molinism does not grant the necessary potential to do otherwise. In fact, William Lane Craig doesn't even believe that the ability to do otherwise is necessary for free will. Not that he's the godsend on Molinism, right? But he is certainly its loudest voice. But not only does it reject that, but it would also reject it would tacitly accept the notion of God determining what the line of events is going to be that leads you to a certain conclusion, right? And actually, what's funny about this is I had made this criticism constantly and caught quite a bit of flack for it. Even amongst some Calvinists, Chris Date wasn't particularly fond with, although I eventually had him coming to my side, wasn't particularly fond with my critique of Molinism. Well, lo and behold, I found out 3 days ago that John Calvin himself had the same critique, which is there's no real way to differentiate between what God has allowed to happen and what God has caused to happen, because he's the unmoved mover. And when you have a situation where he's literally preordaining the timeline in which certain events are occurring, you just have determinism with a few extra steps, right?
Yeah, like because if he knows everything and it's like his inaction and knowledge our action, essentially, something like
Yeah.
that. Because there's no part, unless there's part of it he doesn't know something about, or that he was willy-nilly. Yes, I said willy-nilly. And it made sense. So, but that's why I say free will's magic, obviously, because God has it and he can bestow his magic on whoever he wants. That's my story. And so here's it. The magic happens see, all the problem, all this is just a hypothetical problem. There's just this other dimension that you don't see right now, where it's not indeterminate, but it's not determined. And it's all the magic happens in the journey of time, flow of time and deliberation. Why you choose one over the other? Yeah, you've got reasons. There's influences, but you choose it, and you're accountable to choose the right decision. And that is, save yourself by your works. I don't know. What's the point? Oh, okay. Okay. Here's my real pushback. Okay, so if that's all true, then really determinism is true, and everything else, like you're deliberating, is just kind of like tricking you into thinking you're like deliberating and like making decisions. And so here's the problem with that for me. That's suggestive, like, so in reality is what we should be doing is saying that's an illusion, the idea that you're getting to choose, and there's really nothing all that wrong with somebody putting a gun to your head and making you do one thing over another, because ultimately not only do you not choose your own decisions anyways, really, so you're not really free, but you're also it's God ordained for that guy to do that thing, which was to make you do what you did. He made you do. And so glory be to God for that. And if you feel like anybody deserves praise, like your little kid when they do something good, I don't. That's all an illusion too, and crime, and is just a matter, just like a necessity for like we're a zoo, and the alligators can't be with the pigeons, and we got to, but that guy isn't morally responsible. When somebody apologizes to you for something bad, it's not, there's not like this amazing thing that happened. It's just, he had to. Little did he know, that he had to do that, but he did. And so it's just what'll be will be. And when it goes bad, we'll just say God's mysterious. And when it goes good, we'll give him the glory. And that just seems problematic. That's my my most hardcore critique. The worst way I could say it on you, but I think that is ultimately like in the back of my head what I'm thinking.
Well, so I think that number one, I think that it is biblical to rejoice for everything. And I think that is sometimes a little difficult for us to grasp as human beings. ISIS marched into my village and sexually assaulted all the women and killed all the men and burned it down and destroyed our culture. How do I glorify God for that? But the Bible in more than one place does say that we are to glorify God for all things, right? And Doug Wilson has even made the point previous that the only way that even could make any sense is if he somehow is causally determining everything. Because if he's not causally determining everything, well, then why give him glory for it? That doesn't make any sense, right? He didn't do it. But
I like that notion though, but there's something about evil to me that's like, it's so terrible because it didn't, like, the guy didn't have to murder my daughter after he raped her. He didn't have to, rape her. That's what's so terrible about it to me, like, in a way, right?
The thing is, though, is I think that still holds true. Because when you have in fact, you remember I was telling you about the idol argument the other day, right? Where Aristotle had said, and we read the quote from Oregon, but Aristotle had said it some 500 years earlier, talking about if everything is determined, then whether or not you go to a doctor or don't go to a doctor, and this was actually Oregon's quote, but nonetheless, again, building off of that 500-year argument, whether or not you go to the doctor or don't go to the doctor is irrelevant because you are determined either to recover or not to recover. And the means by which that occurs is simply irrelevant. But the response, which Chrysippus and later Eusebius and Augustine and Calvin and so on would reiterate, was that the means as well as the ends have been foreordained and kind of co-fated with each other. So in other words, you are determined to get well from the disease precisely because you are determined to go to the doctor who has a cure. If you were to go to a different doctor who did not have the cure, or if you were to not go to the doctor at all, it would be because you were not co-fated to, or you were not fated, co-fated is with that, you were not fated to actually recover from this disease, right? And that's, again, I think when you have a proper understanding of compatibilism, where it's supposed to be going. The idea is, at least theologically, that the choices and free moral agency of creatures is the mechanism by which God accomplishes that which he's determined in human affairs.
Fair enough. Let's ask Danny. So we got on a side trail here a little bit, Danny. But in the video, seems to me you're trying to get to the guy. Is where you're going here, and I haven't watched it yet. So I watched the first part before I started this video. But it seemed to me you were going after this guy in the idea of the incarnation being an issue, as far as how can a man also have God's properties and remain being human, or something like that, or no? Is that wrong?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that part of what makes it hard to understand is you have to first entertain the idea of what it means to have a human body, or a body in general. The idea of a body is that it constrains the way that you perceive things, right? So it controls the way that you experience the world, and so that constraint implies a limitation on power. Right? So if God,
Yes. Okay. Good. That's what I was thought you were trying to do. You got sidetracked in here a lot too, with the guy going on kind of weird side trails where you didn't seem to know where you were going with it.
it's been a while since I've seen. Well, this is what, couple weeks old, and is this on my channel?
Yeah, this is yours.
Oh.
I stole it from your channel. I hope that's okay.
No, this is not my channel.
I'm playing your video from your.
Yeah, but no, this is not my video. Is this my video?
Oh, it's from your channel. I thought. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. I searched for your videos and then this came up. So actually, maybe it's not. I don't even know.
This is not my channel. I don't think I uploaded this one because I did.
My bad.
Yeah, it was a little. Jack Hangstrike went crazy in the end.
Yeah, you wouldn't probably say Danny at PhilTalk, would you?
Yeah,
that's the name of the video. That's the name of the video. I thought that
I
was
would never title my video that way
either. Right. Yeah, that went through my mind, but
I think it might be. I mean, I think this guy was kind of slippery. So
yeah. So let's just listen and see. I thought that's where I thought you were going. We're not quite there yet. So I guess Standing's starting his thing in a few, right now, I guess. So I gotta.
Oh, you know what? He's probably sent me an email then.
He just sent a message. Sorry, dude. I forgot. The time got away from me there, Standing.
Well, okay. So with that, then I just saw he did actually send me a message. I think I'm going to go ahead and hop off.
Yeah. Do that.
Go.
I'll be right there.
For sure. Danny, let's talk about this video if you want sometime soon, because I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, there's so many places we could go with this. Maybe we should do that. This is a prior.
Yeah, we could just do this later.
Let's do that.
SFT thing.
Yeah. I will definitely. I want to do that.
You have my number, so you can just text me.
Sounds good, buddy.
Okay, see y'all
later, man. I'll see you in a little bit over at SFT's.
Sorry, man. Yeah, I lost track of time. I just texted Donnie too, saying get in here. I didn't even realize what time it was. So cool. So yeah, we're going over to Standing for Truth, whoever's out there, and doing the soteriology thing. So see y'all over there.
God bless.